This is the 7th episode of Writer's Block. Sam to interrupt me the second time we try to start the stream. Calm down, man. Okay, we got DeKay on this episode. I have a question for you, man. Like, I think what I've been doing with the guests so far is like just like when you start out and that sort of thing. It's just like a weird thing. It's like because they'll be like, oh, like 10 years ago, and it's like that number is really big. And it's like I don't really have a follow up. But like I have a question with your origin. Like you have that famous thing where you like called out a YouTuber, and then I think it was mentioned when you did that show with Thorne and Richard Lewis. But like I think about that thing where you're just like, oh, you called that guy out because he's being a scumbag, and then like you transitioned over to like a journalism career, and it's just like it doesn't like really make sense to me. It's like I don't understand how you get from point A to point B, you know? It's like maybe I just don't understand like fundamental human interactions, but like I just don't physically understand like you like DMing guys on Twitter like, hey, I'm DK, not the Donkey Kong character, but like I made a video on YouTube complaining about another YouTuber. Can I know roster moves? Like I don't understand. Like how did you actually physically like get the information? I don't understand. Like how was that process?
I would say it's something that no one could repeat. Like if they tried to replicate it, it was kind of just a one-off, right place at the right time thing. I made that video just to put on like to respond to something on Reddit, and then someone just like reposted it instead of it just sitting in a comment, and then it blew up. So at the time there were like some teams who had questions from sponsors asking if like certain players are getting dropped because of that guy on YouTube. So they came and thanked me. Like there's a couple of managers of teams that said, hey, thanks for making that video. How about we set something up to where I'll let you know like some things are going on in the scene, and if you report them rather than let this kid just like make stuff up on YouTube, basically make him, it was like their idea to make him irrelevant, I guess you could say, and that combined with people saying you should make more videos. And I was like, all right, well, I had already wished there was someone like that, and not that Richard did stuff like that, but that's right when he accepted the Turner job, so I was already worried like who's gonna kind of take over and who's gonna like look at
that was like what, spring 2016.
So at that point I just like I didn't really plan to do this, and that wasn't my intention, but if people are coming to me, I'll just see what happens. So
yeah, because we make a bunch of jokes like we try to like just DM people on Twitter. I was like, how did you just fucking spam people? Like I just don't understand like the physical process of it.
To be honest, like the people came to me to start with it. Like I didn't even have that idea. They came to me, and I was like, well, I wanted to do it because I was just a fan myself. Like I wanted to know what was going on with teams. Like who doesn't want to know that? That's why people follow me. They want to know what's going on behind the scene. They want to know what's actually happening. I wanted to know. I just honestly wanted to know for myself. And I was like, well, there's a need for this, and I feel like this could be valuable.
Okay, that sort of solves the question in my mind. It's just like I still don't get it. Like, is it Steam messages? Is it Twitter? Like, I don't know. It's just like
it's a one-off thing. Like, it doesn't make sense. I don't think it should.
Yeah. Okay. But for the episode, we're gonna do sort of the Astralis thing, because they're sort of taking the scene by storm right now. Last 3 tournaments, first place, second place, first place, right? And I guess the question for me is like, who can stop Astralis? Because it just seems like they're such in a dominant position. You have the old guard in SK, with 2K that hasn't worked out as well with the whole in-game leader thing. FaZe is not the same team that they were in, September, October. They're not winning. They haven't won. Well, I mean, they did win that tournament recently, but they haven't been winning tournaments for a long time consistently. They're always like second place, top 4 or something like this. So it just seems like Astralis is the natural like predominant leader of the scene, and it just doesn't seem like a Navi or a FaZe or a Mousesports is like prepared to overcome them in any way. It just seems like set that Astralis is going to be the #1 team right now and in the future. I mean, is this where you guys are at? Like maybe Sam, do you think? I mean, maybe this is a rough question to throw at you for the first question of the show, but is there a team that can be Astralis? Can Astralis be stopped by a team in the scene right now? Is there someone you're looking at if you had to name a team?
Yeah, actually, I think the best bet is Navi. So I don't think that if the question is who can be the best team in the world except for Astralis, probably not Navi, but in terms of in a best of 3 or in a best of 5, I think that map pool wise, in terms of skill set wise, Navi is probably the best bet. For one, I think Astralis have always been susceptible to players like Simple, like game break kind of players. I call them Dionysian players, because they're very good at countering aggression when they expect it. But when you do shit that they don't understand or they can't predict, then they're quite susceptible because mentally don't seem very prepared to respond to that. And the second part is that their map pool fits quite well. So they actually beat Astralis in a best of 3, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think it was Star Series.
Only 3
since
teams
then,
have done that, right? FaZe, Navi, and G2 actually.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
But so they beat them, and then they beat them online as well, but they lost in their most recent encounter. But I think that they can take them on Inferno. I think they might even be favored on Inferno. That's a different, but they definitely close to 50-50 on Inferno either way, and they could probably take them on Overpass or Train. It's just that Navi hasn't played that map in a couple lands now. But I think that Astrologers don't play those maps very much anymore as well. So you could totally see them winning those 3 maps in a best of 5, or 2 of them.
On Overpass? Really?
Yeah, Navi is a pretty good Overpass team. Like I know that Astralis are the best Overpass team in the world, but when you have a map that's so much about your Opper,
we'll come back to that that discussion. But Max, do you what do you think about this broad question, the theme of the show?
Yeah.
Is there a team? Did you pick up a team before we started? Do you have something?
Well, I definitely agree with Sam's logic behind picking Navi, in the sense that Astralis are most susceptible when you throw at them just like a chaotic element. The X factor is what they seem most susceptible to. And so in that sense, I think the FaZe matchup is obviously an interesting one, especially if you do have Olaf Master coming back, and a strong Olaf Master at that. I think but then the map pool comes into question. So yeah, I'd probably have either FaZe or Navi, which are pretty boring answers, as the team to beat Astralis. I'd probably pick FaZe with a stronger Olaf, just because there's more win conditions for them to beat Astralis, even in spite of the map pool, rather than just Simple versus Astralis, even though the map pool is more favored.
DK, did you come up with a team? Do you have it seems like we're going to fall across a Navi FaZe line, a border. Which way do you fall?
I would have to agree, FaZe is probably right now. If you want to say they played today, then I think just based on that, even with Exist or without him, I think that's who I'd put my money on. But coming up in the near future, a team I would look at is SK, but it's going to take some time. And, you could say that about any team, but I look at Astralis 2 continuing moving forward. I don't think we can expect an event as good as it was for Device at the Pro League Finals. Everyone's, it's unfortunate, but his stomach issues are a problem. He's been to the hospital, 6 times in 5 months. So I think that's going to be an issue moving forward, and he can get by, facing some of these North American teams, but I can see at some point SK continuing their trajectory of improving and making playoffs to where, these teams meet in a semifinal. And if they can just figure out what to do with bolts, just whatever it takes, whether it's a role swap, I don't know what it is, but it's clearly affecting everyone on the team. And I think if they just fit him into where he can get comfortable, I think it's going to help everyone. I would give them, other than FaZe, that's where I put.
Oh, okay.
What is sorry, I always, when I look at SK's game, I thought Bolts was definitely a stronger player, but I didn't see him as a major issue. What do you see in Bolts as a problem for SK?
Didn't he have a really bad tournament last tournament?
Yeah, I don't think I saw that. Yeah.
Was that Sydney? He had atrocious numbers, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I would say as a whole, he just hasn't been as good than when he first joined. I mean, then if you even go farther back to when he was on Immortals, he was, in my opinion, a top 10 player. At some points on Immortals, he was fantastic, and he just took that onto SK in transition. They won their first event when he was just on one. So it's crazy to see that just adding one player who isn't from the same country, how much that can change the dynamic of your team. I do think also out of those 5 players, he's the worst with his English. And I know a bunch of these guys Cold is not practicing as much because he takes 2 to 3 hours of English classes during the week every day. So I think that's had an effect on I don't know if you guys know that, but I think that's had an effect on their play. They've put a lot of time into trying to get communication down. So if anything, this is, it already takes a long time to, implement a new player to your team. You're implementing a player who speaks a language that isn't native to 4 of your players. And, if you put all that into perspective, I think they're just on a slow, positive trajectory. Everyone knows how good Cold and Fur can be. So I think hopefully once they transition back to Fallen in-game leading, that it will really help them. I would hate to see Cold's performance take a dive because of that burden.
Yeah, it's sort of weird, right? That it's like you think about it, it's like, wow, that's a huge barrier, but then at the same time, if they like start to make up that barrier, there seems like a huge upward, like a huge ceiling, right? Yeah. Sam, did you were sort of getting a nod, a look? Did you have a comment on SK? Do you think they have the potential? Do you think, like, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this roster? We did a SK episode not that long ago. What do you think? Like, we were sort of talking about it when we did that episode on SK, that you and Max and I sort of agreed that maybe they should have just kept that roster with Taco. You see Taco having a good event, making the finals of this last tournament with Liquid. I mean, do you think that this? What do you think of the new SK? Basically, you can go with whatever direction you want.
Oh, back then it was a little different because back then one of the best players at that time was Fallen, and Fallen was still in-game leading. Now Fallen is not in-game leading on 5 out of 7 maps, I think, and which is already weird, first of all, and second, that's like some G2 shit. And then now, like, Fallen looks a little different. Like, I don't think that Fallen is very confident right now, and I feel like if you're going against Astralis, if Device plays well, like, obviously his health seems to be a concern by the way you're describing it, but like, if Device plays well, like, he doesn't even need to play amazing. Like, it's going to be a problem for Fallen. He needs to be quite strong and reinvent his game, because as he said himself, he's been a bit figured out recently, and so it's a very difficult thing. Like, he doesn't, if your best player or one of your best players is not performing well at all, it takes a lot of SK's firepower depth away. So while they have 3 very strong players, at least historically, the fact that Fallen's not there at all, seemingly, like, he hasn't been terrible, but he's been kind of like Skadoodle, right? Like, just not super sexy at all, and it's been problematic, I think. And I don't see, unless Fallen changes his performance, I don't see them contesting Astralis over 5 maps.
I forgot to mention, they need to stop fucking playing in front.
Oh yeah, I saw them first picking at that. What was that versus Astralis, that series? I thought that was very strange.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's very strange.
Max, I seen your boss Thorin go off on Twitter about the relationship between Taco and Coldzera. You see Coldzera's numbers dip with Taco leading lineup. Thorin's always sort of pushing this narrative that it's all about that Taco Coldzera combination. Have you what have you seen from Coldzera, if you've looked at him at all? Do you think that, I mean, like, it's obviously a difference, right? It does seem like he's very out of place, and it's hard to distill that with the in-game leader role, and then with how much is that Stewie DeKay in the English. It's all sort of combining, right?
Well, that's the biggest thing, is the amount of variables to take into account with SK as a whole, right? Like, there is so much going on. Like, even when you look at things like Cobble being removed, like, it's a small thing relative.
It's a big change for them.
Yeah, but like, relative to it's a big change, and so I think there's a lot of things going on, not only within SK but in the scene as a whole right now. And to simply like just push it as Taco moving, and specifically Taco's role, might be a bit disingenuous to the complexity of analyzing something like SK's roster, because you have to, like, there's definitely is a sort of streak of logic there, in the sense that Coldzera is a player that heavily relies on space being bought for him, and he definitely doesn't feel like that player who can dominate like dry engagements in the same way that Nico can. It feels more so like he's elegant in the way he can approach very complex problems, as being able to straight up just dominate simple ones. At least that's the way that I look at it. And so I think he struggles probably a lot in that sense in a system that is in English. And it was funny when I interviewed Fallen. He's like, I don't think there's that many problems in this team right now outside of our entire system moving to English. And I'm like, well, that seems like a pretty fucking big problem. Like that's a major issue. Especially for SK and the way they play the game. And when I hear things like, we're going to be reinventing the entire way we play, we're changing up roles constantly, it feels like SK getting away from what made them so good as a team, which is this idea that they're so cohesively together and that they're so all on the same page that they can just fucking play like 9 tournaments back to back to back, and just by the inertia of their own talent and team play and ability, they can like carry through and have all this success through these tournaments. And so I feel like with the current SK line, it feels like they're definitely getting away from what makes them so good as a team, and by extension of that, Cold Zero's game is suffering as well. So yeah, in a sense, I agree with what Thorin's saying, but I also don't, because it doesn't really account for the whole picture.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, and calling. I hope that you were referring to Thorin when you were talking about disingenuous and not me. But yeah, anyway, with the well, it's interesting with the SK roles, because before, like going back to FNX and stuff like that, they had a very defined player-by-player role system where it was like, you have a very specific idea of who Fur is and who Fallen is and who Cold Zero is. They're very distinct players. And actually that seems like what Astralis has going for them right now. It seems like Astralis is like the standard bearers on that, with very distinct Dupree, Zipnix, Device, that sort of lineage. But other than just like the fact that SK have this raw like potential DK, like did you think about it in terms of like map pool or specific play styles matching up, or what was it, or is it more of the legacy and the precedent?
I base it a lot on just what we know that team can do. And I also, like I mentioned, unfortunately, I factor in Device. I mean, he has been inconsistent in the past, but I just can't imagine how he can continue to even bring some of those performances that we've seen recently. I love it when I see it, but I can't count on that to come in every event. So if you get an event where he is, mediocre, or he's not hitting shots, and Fallen has found a little bit of something, I can see where if maybe they prioritize like a map, I don't know, maybe if they just really can't really focus on Dust 2, but if you take that risk, you take that gamble to where those players are playing cohesively on SK and kind of just catch them off. And I also think it would take somewhat of a subpar performance from Glaive. Like I still find it amazing to this day that he finds a way to have such a involved role on both sides as an in-game leader. Like there's so many in-game leaders that they try to do that, but either through an event or through a series, they're micromanaging so much that either their play sucks, or they're just missing reads and not making the right calls. And he seems to consistently always know what the other team's doing. He's always killing people through smoke, that always knows when to call some sort of nade stack. So I think it would take some sort of mind game in the map veto, and then kind of just gamble on a map that you don't feel Astralis is 100% on. And Dust 2, I don't think any team, I think it'll just be like the last iteration. No team's going to have more than, like I say, a 60-65% win rate against Tier 1.
Well, it's interesting. Dust 2 is a sort of a wild card, right? When you saw Inferno getting added into the map pool, it wasn't it never really settled, It still hasn't really settled on who's the best team, and there's a really strong consistency on that map, and we really don't know how Dust 2 is going to play out. There's that classic idea of it being skill-based and more variable in terms of results. We haven't seen that played out. We saw Astralis play Dust 2 twice, and I think crush Mousesports 16-3, right? And then Liquid like 16-1, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's not always going to be there for Astralis, right? As we move forward. But Sam, you were talking about Astralis's map pool, referring to the Navi matchup. Did you have like a map by map breakdown of like, you were sort of getting into it in the opening statement, but I cut you off because I wanted to get the opening remarks. What was your theory on how Navi, or was it It was Navi, not FaZe,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
thought they had.
Well, I just think that Astralis have a really stretched out map pool, and just looking at Navi's best map is Inferno, and Inferno's always been a topsy-turvy map, and Astralis have been dominant on Inferno recently. But I think
it's like one tournament, right? They won like 5 games at this last LAN, but like before that they were like 2 and 3, or they won 4 games and they were 2 and 3, but ahead of time.
They were really good on Inferno, except for the first event they played. I think at Star Series they were really bad on it, if my memory serves me well. And since then they've been very good. But I think that on a lot of these maps, Astralis is relying on a tactical innovation, or on many tactical innovations, and we've seen that fade over time. Not just because other teams can adapt or expect it, but also because they can replicate it, and so that advantage kind of fades. And so I think that we're going to see like some of the shit they were doing with nade stacks everywhere, but like against Liquid on Dust 2, it was fucking stupid. And that kind of stuff, or just playing around with the shadows, you know.
And so with that Glaive clip or whatever, where
he did it multiple times, and that kind of stuff teams are going to get used to. And so I think you're going to see their map pool shrink in dominance a little bit, or shrink in dominance, sorry, not shriek. And I think that I think I'm a little skeptical of them having like being able to play all the maps. And I think that as they try to work on other maps, some of them are going to break. So whether it's Train, whether it's Overpass, whether it's Inferno, one of those maps is going to become less dominant. And Navi is a pretty good team on all of them. Actually, like Max seemed to disagree with that, which is fine. But I think that Navi can definitely win one map, and they're kind of like have a puncher's chance of winning a few other maps. And so I think that they're a pretty good example of a team that can win that can win like 4 out of 10 times, maybe against Astralis 3 out of 10 times. But the point I want to stress is that over time, I think you're going to see more and more Astralis' map pool fade. Now, if they choose to skip a lot of events, that's going to slow down because they're going to expose less of their tactical advantages. But some of them are just going to adapt, and other teams are going to improve at those maps as well as Astralis innovates. And so there's a bit of a ticking time bomb on every single set play or set nade play that they develop. So
Max, were you disagreeing? I didn't see you shake your head. Were you shaking your head at
I think there's a few different ways you can think about Astralis' dominance. And I think, first of all, the biggest like special characteristic that Astralis has going for them is that they're unique in that they like distinctly feel like the best team in the world, if you know what I mean. Like there's
it's
no
been a long
denying
time since what FaZe in October, since we've really seen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can either look at it as either the best team, the other teams in the world get significantly better to contest Astralis, or Astralis fades. And I don't see a reason beyond the sort of figuring out of their tactics to like sort of suggest that Astralis is going to fade anytime soon. And I would rather go down the route of like looking at like Simple being dominant, or Olaf coming back to FaZe and becoming dominant again, as opposed to Astralis becoming worse. Because with things, just because Astralis can win a game in so many ways beyond just nade stacks or beyond device being subpar, like they have so many players that can do just absurd things, and then you add their macro and their cohesiveness and their anti-stratting. Like there's just so many different layers to Astralis that I think even if there are factors like maybe one of their maps becomes slightly weak, or maybe if device becomes sick, there's still so many sort of like safeguards to fall back on for them to win games. And especially when you're looking at a best of 5 or a best of 3, I always think the team with the most layers and the most win conditions is going to be the one that edges it out. And really the only thing that I can see happening to them is that sort of like loss against the impossible, which is what, you know, Simple and FaZe brings to a degree. And I also think even teams like Fnatic, if they find form that play that really loose brand of style, or if maybe Mouse decides, like obviously, I see your face there, Sam.
It's just Fnatic have lost like 4 best of 3s against Astralis in this roster.
But it's the Swedish Cowboys, Sam.
Yeah,
it's JW, baby. It's gonna happen, dude. And also the like more broad overarching narrative is I'm just a massive Danish dick rider. And, love Astralis being the best team in the world because they're so fun talent-wise.
No, but
I think we're having. Okay, you go ahead.
Wait, I just want to interject quickly, which is one of the things one of the biggest event this Astralis has is not just like specific nade stacks, but it's the way they think about using utility and their initiative using utility. And I think that teams looking at them are going to develop maybe not a perfect initiative, but a very similar initiative where they expand their consciousness about what they can do with nades. And not just frags, any kind of nade. And I think that's going to improve, like we saw with that sort of Molotov revolution and stuff like that. Like
the Molly, the flash stacks.
Yeah, and so I think they're going to lose a bit of an edge that way. But obviously, they're still just in terms of firepower, they're a super stacked team. So they're going to be a very good team for a long time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can go two ways with that. Like they're so in form right now that it seems like they can only go down, or you could go. But maybe I should go to DeKay first. Like, where do you fall on the side of the debate? It seems like Sam's more of the side that like it's other teams could catch up, and then or wait, I fucked it up. Was it that Max is saying that it's other teams are going to catch up, and Sam is saying that Astralis is going to fall down. I think I fucked this
pretty
up.
Much. No,
pretty much. Okay.
Pretty much. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right. All right. Does this make sense? Do you fall away? Do you think that you're sort of talking about Astralis falling down with you don't think Device is going to be able to maintain this level of form consistently because of his health issues? But what do you think about the prospects of the other team? We sort of talked about SK. Do you think that FaZe have that next gear? I mean, we saw sort of an embarrassing result versus FaZe at this most recent tournament. They had 8 rounds against Astralis across 2 maps, lost their own ACPIP. Where do you sort of fall on this dividing line that I'm having trouble defining?
I've singled out Device just because I think that's the most likely scenario that could happen in the future. But I agree with Max. Device can play subpar and they can still win an event. I think that regardless of who's feeling it or not, they're still a semifinal, or probably even a team that's just in the finals by default. So I would say it's going to take other teams having to catch up and not innovate themselves. But just like sports, Counter-Strike's a copycat league. There's people, there are so many people that have already downloaded and gone through all these demos. So it's so hard not only to get that initiative, and Zonic obviously is a great coach to help influence that to innovate already, but in a game that has been, a meta that has shifted so many times already, and there's only so many things you can do in the current stage of the game, it's so hard to innovate on top of that. I think that they won't necessarily get worse, but there's the scene outside of them. I don't have too much confidence in any team, so it's going to take all these other teams getting better to knock them off, or just give them a run for their money. Because I mean, like you said, FaZe is only getting 8 rounds. If that team, with Olaf or not, if that team is only getting 8 rounds, like that's almost, I don't want to say not excusable, because Astralis just looks like they've solved the game, but I think there's a lot of improvement that can be done throughout.
It's almost weird where you see in the best of 5 they played at Sydney, where it was so close, but then it's like it was so close, but they had like so many breaks and so many great performances by FaZe, almost like exception to the rule, where it seems like that they're not going to be able to repeat that. And it seems like more of a regression to the mean with this most recent loss. But I sort of have a different theory than you guys. I mean, I'm thinking of like back when FaZe was dominant with the original lineup when they got Olafmeister and Guardian, where you saw this thing where they looked extremely, extremely dominant at 2 tournaments in a row. They like didn't lose a map, right? And then they go to Epicenter and they go out in the group stage. They lose to VP and SK, or was it VP and SK? I think. Yeah, and that was SK with the Bolts lineup. Right, and they went out in the group stage. It was VPSK, Gambit, and FaZe in that group, I think. And and everyone was like, okay, well, Rain had an off event, Olafmeister had an off event. That was just like, you can't keep that form forever. But I've always been the opinion that that was an event where you saw a turn in how teams played against them in terms of their map pool. It was not people didn't understand that FaZe was now a team that could play these 3 specific maps: Inferno, Mirage, and a third one, which
Overpass.
is Overpass, right? Which people didn't understand. Like Astralis picked Overpass into FaZe, right? And when they played them at E-League Season 3 or E-League Premier or whatever, I think we think about Astralis as a Overpass train team because that's who they were for a year and a half, right? But they've played one game of train in the last 90 days, and I think they played 2 games. One was a loss to FaZe, and one was a 16-13 win over Renegades. Like, not super convincing results by any means. It seems like I agree with Sam's point earlier that someone like a Fnatic or a Navi who could play train might be able to test some waters. I don't think Astralis are tested on all their maps quite yet. Inferno, it feels like they had one very, very solid event right now with Inferno, with 4 straight wins. But before that, it doesn't seem as consistent. Overpass, okay, they still look really strong. I think they're 7-2 in the last 3 months. Train, not tested. But the issue, I think, comes down to the Mirage cash thing where they're switching up their permabans back and forth. Yeah. Now, last episode, we talked about it, how I thought it was a great idea that they were banning Mirage every time because it's such a popular map. Why not ban Mirage every time, right? I think that's a great idea. Stop trying to contest people where people are very strong. Like Mousesports is famously has a great record on Mirage in comparison to the other maps. But it feels like it's sort of funny, the parallels between current FaZe, the old FaZe and current Astralis, because FaZe back then was trying to do the 7 map pool thing. And I just feel like this is a recipe for disaster. If, like you're saying, they're reliant on being cutting edge, they also have to do it on 7 maps. Like, this is like almost a ludicrous proposition. Someone pick up the ball.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I can jump in. So, because I think Astralis don't think of permabans. So, like, I think if they came up against a Navi or a Fnatic in that situation and they weren't confident in their train, they'd be more willing to ban train and play Mirage or Cash. Because I would probably, maybe, like, I think Navi's Mirage, they would definitely have, like, as you're saying before, Sam, like a puncher's chance on that map. You still have to remember, like, Astralis are world-class Mirage and Cash side. Like, they are exceptional on both those maps. I think train is probably their weakest map, and I think definitely, as you're saying, like the cutting edge factor in maps like Dust 2 will probably fade away over time, especially as other teams like come up to that level, which I think is the main thing that I'm thinking about. But yeah, I think they're like so dynamic in how they can approach vetoes, given how like both wide stretched and strong they are on the map pool, that I think it'll be more so factors pertaining to individual performance in the server rather than the map veto before it.
I disagree with that. I think there's a couple maps that they're gonna start struggling more on as teams do that. The first one's Dust 2, as I mentioned, but the other one's Inferno.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That seems inevitable. There's no way they can blow teams out of the water 16-3, 16-1.
Well, no one does. But one of the reasons they've been so good on Inferno, well, there's a couple of reasons. The first is that Maj is just like the best pit player in the world right now. He's incredible, and like that's okay, whatever. That's probably gonna stay.
What about Easy, man?
Okay, fuck off. And then so. Okay, AZ is a punchline. That's how you know. Yeah. with North. But I think that the other thing is that they've been really, really good on their T side at using utility to get picks and to enter the B bomb site. And also Magisk has been like lurking on the B bomb site and has been getting a ridiculous amount of kills. Yeah, sure. But what I'm saying is that they're getting edges that they shouldn't be getting. Or that they won't be getting for very long, as teams understand the way that they can take advantage and get picks, and I think that that's going to fade over time. And historically, just looking at this new Inferno, very few teams have been dominant for a very long period of time. Even when FaZe was very dominant on the map, that faded 100%. Away within 2 or 3 months, and now they're just average on the map, at least if memory serves me well. So I think and since they've been relying quite heavily on that map recently. I think that could be a bit of a problem for them.
So you're saying Navi would be the team to beat Astralis on Inferno, right?
I think they're a really good Inferno team. So
but like, then you think like, what are the win conditions for Navi on Inferno? It's like simple, their banana take, and like elements of their CT aggression, right? Like, isn't that sort of the same logic, or in the sense like they're just finding ways to edge out advantages on Navi's side as well.
Yeah, but less tactically. And also, I would say that
true.
I think that Astralis has been quite susceptible when they make quite a few aggressive plays in Banana on their CT side, and they can really easily get picked off in those cases.
Yeah,
they've just been fortunate, and they've counter punished by stacking grenades instead of flashing afterwards, and that's like that's a benefit. But they have made a lot, like whether it's Zipex or whether it's Magus peeking out, like wide peeking half wall and stuff like that, and they've gotten picked. And I think that once you get a player like Electronic or Simple going there, they can take advantage. And once they realize that, oh, we should stop for a moment and wait and run our default after getting these one or two picks, we'll relax, and now we have a 5v3 and we're going to win. Like, I think you're going to see them getting punished a lot more. Yeah. So I just think that Astralis... I definitely
feel like that's not Astralis' comfort zone at all, and they do that out of necessity rather than like just knowing that they should be aggressive on Banana, as opposed to like naturally wanting to make that. Whereas Na'Vi are the team, they'll be like, fuck it, let's get Simple with the scout or like some shit to go down Banana. You know, yeah, I agree with that for sure.
So I just think...
there's also the overarching theme with Inferno, where you can get money fucked right on the CT side, and it's just so hard. You know, that's like Astralis' thing is we're to keep talking about is the CT utility in general. And if you get sort of in that low buy repeat category, it's really punishing. You see, I was trying to figure out a way in like in a spreadsheet at one point to like try to capture like the swinginess of the CT side, because it just seemed like it'd just be like 7-8, like, but it wouldn't be 7-8 overall. It'd be like 7 rounds by one team, then 8 rounds by the other team. It's just like that economy would switch over, and it, you know, because just the way that Banana plays out. But I had a question for DK, but I forgot about it. Well, what was it? Oh, okay. So we were sort of inviting you late to the party last week or 2 weeks ago when we did our last episode. We were talking about this general theme about the permaban, right? Because Astralis was doing something that I was super fanboying over, which was they were permabanning a really popular map. I think this is a great idea.
It's the happiest I've ever seen, Scott.
Yeah, pure joy, right? Pure joy, or whatever the joke is. Yeah. But what do you think about this? Like, I saw an episode of Counterpoints where Moses was like, they get really excited about the prospect of a team trying the 7-map pool and being like some legendary like world beater by just dominating the entire game. But like my thing is that seems like arrogant as fuck to me. Like I just don't think it's possible to maintain that. Do you have a general feel and maybe even specifically tying it to Astralis?
Well, I don't agree that a team should try to aim for 7 maps. I don't think the amount of times where that would come in handy is worth the reward or worth the time put into it. I honestly think a team just needs like 2 elite maps. That way, when a team ban one of them, you have a go-to. And then I think the rest of them, so let's say 3, I mean, maybe 4 more if you really want to, if you want to run 6 maps. But I think you only need 5 extremely strong maps. The only time where it may bite you is in a best of 5, but I don't see any reason to play 7. So I think they should just continue their trend of banning a Mirage when you need to ban a Mirage, or just ban the strength of your opponent who may only have 1 good map and you're already a leg up before you even play. So it sounds cool. Like, there's plenty of in-game leaders that say, oh yeah, we're a 7-map team, but no one...
so,
I don't think any team you can't be a 7-map team. I don't think in any day and age, especially not now.
I think that there's a couple maps that Astralis are probably not practicing, and they just feel comfortable. Like, for example, they're probably not practicing trains, just no one plays train, like, so no one's picking it against them. And then, and I don't think that they're... I think it's quite unlikely that they're practicing Cache very much. Like, Cache is such a default map. You probably, okay, you know your nades, whatever. We're just going to play it if we need to. And they ban it against some teams, but when they need to ban Mirage against the team because they know they're weaker, they'll ban Mirage and they'll handle Cache. Like against Liquid or something, or against Mousesports, they'll ban Mirage because they know that if it's Cache, well, neither of us are excellent on Cache. But if they're facing... they banned it against SK. They banned it against FaZe. Obviously, they're like, okay, well, we can't win Cache here, but most of the time, we're willing to gamble it if it's the opponent's pick because both of us are just all right on this map. So I don't think. What? Go ahead.
Didn't one of them say that they were practicing Cobblestone before it got removed? Didn't someone?
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
I just don't.
I mean, but
why?
I think teams are such liars about that stuff. Or they'll practice a little bit and be
they
like,
do lie about how much practice. Either when someone adds a new player, they'll say we only got 3 hours of practice, when really they practice for like 3 days. Not that 3 days is enough, but that happens all the time. And people will lie about the extra work they're putting in. It's very common.
Yeah, sure. But the point I'm making is that they're probably practicing 5 or 6 maps, and they're just comfortable leaving out another map and stuff like that.
Have to watch.
They gotta be prepared to do it at least. They have to if you're gonna swing that Mirage Cash first ban in a best of 3, you have to be at least might have to do extra prep. It seems like it's a taxing thing, especially with what I was saying before.
I just like the idea of Glaive just having a massive cock and just being like, nah, fuck these guys, we're the best teams in the world.
The thing you have to watch out too is everyone knows how Kerrigan can be in interviews. They know how he can be in map vetoes, but you have to keep an eye on him. He will specifically say stuff about maps they're playing, maps they're practicing, what they're little details like that are completely not true. He's just trying to get in the head of somebody who's paying attention. Like if a team who has scrimmed them for the past week or two and they haven't played, I don't know, pick any map, played a cache or played whatever, it could be any map, and he says in an interview, they end up playing that one map against one team, and he says, oh yeah, we've been playing it a ton. He could just be lying. Even though they got away with the win there, he can put the fear in another team to ban it later in the tournament. And I don't think people consider he is the master of using an interview or using just anything. He does it all the time, and I don't think people pick up on it. There's a lot of times where there's no way you would know unless you know the players or you know who they're practicing or what they practice, that if you're not paying attention and you take him for his word, it might fight you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. I think I think I did a video. I think it's Kerrigan takes risks in the pick and ban phase, but it should be I should have just been Kerrigan's pick and ban phase is arrogant as fuck. I just think he's just will be really super ballsy with the interviews and stuff like that. The famous IEM Sydney last year with all the cobblestone thing with Astralis.
I did that interview with Glaive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, good job, man.
Thanks, man. That's all I'm here for. Yeah.
You threw me off. Okay. But it's interesting. It's interesting now. It feels like Glaive is trying to pick up a little bit on that. He's trying to. I feel like he's copying Kerrigan a little bit. He's 6 months behind or something. He's trying to be a little bit of Kerrigan with the switching up of the first bans and best of 3s. But Max, you were saying last episode that you thought they should have banned Cash with their first ban in that best of 5 versus FaZe in the final. Do you feel validated by their choice to start switching up their first ban now? Do you feel like it's a good choice?
Well, that was in part just because I knew that they weren't just thinking, okay, Mirage is now a permaban. Their mentality is more we'll just ban whatever's strong. And against FaZe, I would have preferred to see them. I think Astralis have a better chance against FaZe on Mirage than on Cash. I think FaZe is low key. If we're going for the feel like they don't practice sort of route, I don't feel like FaZe practice Cash a lot, but I think the map just plays so much into FaZe's strength as a team that it's just such a good map for them naturally. And so, whereas it goes in the opposite direction for Astralis, where I think Dupree's a fine secondary AWP, but the map's so much defined by double AWP presences on CT side that, yeah, I don't know. I don't really buy Astralis's Cash as much as their Mirage. That's why I was sort of going in that direction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when FaZe first started playing that map, Cash, I actually got in an argument with Yanko on Twitter once about this. The only time I've ever tried to argue with him, but I didn't think their Cash was very good for a long time. There was that famous final game versus I think Fnatic. It might have been Nip. No, I think it was Nip, where they really looked weird and looked off on the T side of Cash, and they were really struggling. They also had a really horrible Cash T side versus Gambit at Epicenter. I think went to overtime. But yeah, no, I think that they've improved a bit, but maybe, it just naturally sort of suits their strengths.
Well, even their best of 3 against Tyloo, that first half against on Cash, the first map was not great for FaZe. I'm looking at it right now, it's 8-7. So Tyloo CT side where the
Yeah,
motherfuckers
yeah.
don't even speak the same language. They like managed to get 7 rounds against FaZe. So
They also got 12-3 on their T side against Astralis at Blast. I remember because they won that game, and that really scarred me because Astralis lost the best of that.
Max, you were telling us a story before the last episode started about Tyloo. Did you feel comfortable saying that on air? Is that cool?
Oh yeah, but essentially, like, what happened was, so in the press room when Tyloo came up to do media, like everyone was saying, oh yeah, you can only talk to Ben Tent or Excurate because the Chinese players just don't speak any English. Like, okay, cool, whatever. And so then I spoke to Ben Tent, spoke to Excurate, and I was just sort of sitting near the 3 Chinese players, and they were like talking Mandarin and stuff. And then a HyperX rep from China came to them with like a big camera on a dolly and was like talking like really fast Mandarin to them, and they were sort of like looking a bit reluctant. And then I just hear the words like, HyperX, we are all gamers. And they were like, oh, no, we can't do it. And then he like kept repeating that over and over again, like, HyperX, we are all gamers. And then he like went 3, 2, 1, pointed at it, and then like 2 players, I don't know who like their faces, but 2 players didn't even say the words, and then one of them just went, gamers, like just like
So
they couldn't repeat the phrase. And then you just hear the like the interviews where they're just like, it's like we're working together, like we can speak simple English to each other. I'm like, really though?
Yeah, I just think that's hilarious. Like that they're like doing like kind of decent at tournaments. It's so weird. I thought that story was great. I just thought I'd throw it in there.
Yeah, no,
but
sure.
Maybe to like just sort of transition to like a last segment of the show. DK, you've been sort of writing some interesting articles recently about like historical roster moves and stuff like that. And we were sort of talking earlier about the episode and sort of come up a couple times like, okay, maybe Astralis is the best team in the world, and maybe these teams have a chance, Na'Vi, Fnatic, FaZe. But like, what do you think about like roster moves on the horizon? I mean, this is sort of your like field, right? I mean, there's obviously sort of the gold mine of the possible simple flamey thing into SK, and that sort of like weird. I can't even like think about that. That's just like too bizarre in my mind to like comprehend.
It happened in that dimension.
Yeah.
But like, what do you think about like moves on the horizon, moving into the major and in the major cycle and afterwards? I mean, is there is there things in your mind of like what could happen in terms of like a team forming that could beat Astralis, or maybe it's not even like a real world example where you think, oh, I know this guy's talking to this guy, but like, what would be cool to you? Would you like to see like Mousesports pick up someone like Woxic, Sam's favorite opper, or something like this?
There's a lot of moves I could definitely like speculate about or talk about, but I don't think there's any that can really be made that I could be confident in saying that they're going to beat Astralis. Like I think there's too many variables, and just it's very rare that a team forms and is just great right out of the get-go. Like, I don't know how the whole Heroic even had some of the results they had.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
Like, where did that come from?
so
That doesn't happen. That's like a 5% of the time, maybe less, that you just throw some random guys together and it works. And even if you plan it out, like even if you think it's going to be the sickest team, I'm sure SK didn't think it would be such a struggle. So, since I use SK as my example, I think if maybe one more event, I believe they're at Star Ladder, right? So if this event Bolt's still struggling, why not go get someone else? Why not get an automatic or someone else who you could throw it in there? And I don't think again they would be good right off the get-go. But if you're aiming for the major, and if Astralis is peaking now, and I don't see how they can get even better, I can see where something like that would work. I personally think, other than SK and then maybe FaZe if all came back, Na'Vi would be next to my list, like Sam said. If you just finally kick Edward, they might have a fighting chance.
Thank God. Thank God someone's saying
there's like 8 players you could pick in that region who you could slot right in. They speak the language, and they would probably do anything to play with Simple and play with some of those guys. Electronic is finally doing what he was brought there to do. So I think if I had to pick a team that you put a player in and they have the best chance to beat Astralis, it's Na'Vi. And it's get any serviceable player. I don't even care. Like you could get a Bondic. He would play better than Edward in that.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about Doja and Dren when we talked about this with Maui Steak. I mean, both of these sound fine to you. Like, it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Dren, I'm ready. I'm publishing a column on this. So Dren is the best fucking one by far. Because
I'd love.
I don't know if you watched Senya. He did a show with Thorn, but he was talking about Edward, and he was like, "Oh, you know," in his really scary Russian accent. He was like, "Oh, you know, Edward brings veteran smarts and it's probably secondary shot calls."
It's all just a lie.
Yeah. Okay, but here's the thing: if you don't want to bring in like Mir or something for that reason, okay, Mir's younger, but a Dren.
I mean, I think that guy specifically said in that interview, like, these idiots think they can bring in Mir to replace Edward. There's no way they could do that.
I would put a lot of money on the fact that team would play better.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm saying a Dren will do anything to fit into a team. Like he's become an in-game leader multiple times for his team. He's also innately a secondary.
So is Doja, man. So is Doja. He's back.
No. Okay, a Dren, 28 years old, only 2 years younger than Edward. Been playing for almost as long, as far as I know. He's a really smart player. He can do anything. He's a really good entry fragger, and he's willing to do the dirty roles, whether that's in-game leader or fucking anchoring a bomb site or anything like that. And so how can you not think that Dren will just be vastly superior than Edward at everything that Edward is doing right now in and out of the server? That would be
I think you're missing a key component, actually. I know for a fact that Edward is prominently featured in some mouse ads, and I don't know if Dren has the charisma. That's why I think you gotta go with Doja.
They even
have the meme factor going for him.
They even have the same personality. They're both super chipper people, and they're super happy all the time and scary Russians, and they're just fucking awesome. So like, I think that would villains. Yeah, but that's a perfect no. Okay, my point is that like even now that Gambit is like down in the dumps and they're not doing anything and they're switching in game leader roles, like it's the first time in a while that Na'Vi is like a better team than Gambit, like because it's been quite a few months and since it's been clear, but now in the past couple months it's obvious. So Dren should be willing to make the move if Na'Vi want to pay the money, which they probably don't. But you know, anyway, is that realistic, DK? Could that happen?
If there's a region I know the least about, it's probably the CIS, because I feel like people have guns to their heads when I probably try to
both literally and metaphorically.
There's probably someone on the other end like with a gun to their head, like, do not send a message, do not reply to him. So I would love it to happen. I think if you removed a Dren, you pick up a real in-game leader for Gambit and a Dren goes to Na'Vi, I think both team benefit from it. I think
100%.
Automatically they would benefit from it. Yeah. That's a fantastic choice. So, will it happen? I don't know. But I think like people just say, you know, they always want to talk about how much Simple loves Na'Vi and how it's his dream organization. But I think that's over. Like he already tried to jump ship once, and if it was 1.2 million for Flamey and Simple, like I said, there's going to come a time where a team's just not going to care. They're going to pay that money for both of them or whatever Na'Vi decides to charge. You know, the next time around, and they're just going to sell Flamey off after that just to get Simple, and he's going to leave. And if he was willing, here's the thing a lot of people miss, is he was willing to move to NA by himself to play with SK. If that already was willing to happen and they don't improve or this just continues and they don't decide to make a change, I think you're going to lose him. I think you're missing your window of opportunity, especially with how good he's been playing. He is fantastic, and I think he can carry that on for years, but you don't know what you have until it's gone, and I think clock's ticking before he's gone.
All right, Sam, I didn't mean to deprive you of an opportunity to perform fellatio on your boy Woxic. Is there a roster that you think you could create a maybe a fictional, not real world, like you don't.
It's alright. Like I got this Woxic, Cirque, like MSL.
all the favorites from the show. Sam, did you cut out of the show?
Sorry, I disconnected for a moment, but I got your question. Okay. I think
his internet couldn't even handle his excitement.
Okay, so I think I got the move. Okay, if your question is about Mousesports or Woxic, I got the move. You remove Sticko and you remove Oscar, and you add NBK and Woxic. Get out of me.
Why Oscar?
Because Oscar is not, even though he's a very, very capable player and he's important for the identity of Mousesports, he is not a reliable player. And so, like, I've watched a lot of Mouse demos, and I'm getting a little tired of watching Oscar kind of like bomb it, especially because Mousesports relies so much on Oscar in their T and their CT side setups, especially their defaults. It's very frustrating when he doesn't do well. Like, oftentimes the strategy on T side Mirage is just, okay, Oscar, you're gonna entry B apps alone, and if you get 2 kills, we're gonna win the round. If you don't, we're fucked. And Oscar isn't capable of being that good that often. He slumps off. He has a lot of halves and a lot of maps, and Maurice he's gone down in form recently. But he's just not a reliable player, and I think Woxic is a slightly less capable aggressive player in all likelihood, maybe just by temperament, but he is a very, very consistent and versatile and well-rounded opper, and so he could force them to play a more conventional style in some sense with their opper, force them to have actual strats or more strats, and then at the same time he would be a more reliable firepower source. And then Sticko for NBK is just like, Sticko's fine, but I think NBK is probably a better anchor. So
Good secondary combo with Chris J as well.
DK, you just released news on NBK possibly going to Cloud9 today. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah, I was about to say that's my move. Like, if we want to create a team that can potentially beat the Astralis, just create the chaotic ball of an Apex-led Cloud9. Like, remove fucking FNS, get Apex on that bitch, and just play complete chaos. Just absolute
Apex
mayhem.
And what's fuck. Who's the guy? Optic guy. Fuck, I'm forgetting his name.
Stanislaw.
Rush.
Oh,
I feel like Rush and Apex would like be a very good, like, if you were doing like 2 separate entries, like 2 groups. Like that's like really great. You have like 2 dedicated entry guys who would like big upswings and potential, like can get like the 3K like crazy entries.
Even Tarek on the entry, he's fine. Like,
that's great. Too.
Yeah, that's a devastating T side force. I think that's look, CT side will just we'll put that one up to the gods, but definitely T side they'll be dangerous as fuck. Like, and then I get config in for automatic. Like, let's just go all in, boys. Like, let's make this happen. Like, 14-1.
Remove Skadoodle and add Stewie 2K, and you're golden, baby.
Nah, dude, like, that's too much. That's too much in theory, dude. We don't know what's gonna happen.
But okay. Well, the question is it NBK or Apex, or is it either? Like, is Cloud9 planning on removing Skadoodle as well, or Rush or someone?
Some people seem to think so. I personally don't. So I don't put a lot of stock into those who have said so. As far as I know, this is just it's already settled. No, like, basically, I don't know what happens. Say that if for some reason, I don't know why they win ECS, maybe they stick together. But it's kind of like it was with Fnatic and Golden. He was going to leave that team, and then they end up winning the event. So maybe that could happen. But they've already cut him essentially. So they're just kind of like a dead team walking. And so
that's so fucked.
In my opinion, since it's Apex or NBK, that's kind of awkward between the 2 of them. Like, how do you even figure that out? Like, do you try both of them out after the event while you're in Europe, or like how do you make it work? How do you decide between the 2? Obviously, you go with which thing's going to benefit your team best, but you're essentially breaking one of their hearts by choosing one or the other. So I don't know how they're going to go about doing that. But that's
so interesting.
One of the other.
Like, the 2 different ways they could go with that, because if you like want to go with NBK, you're essentially just almost pushing like a similar thing, like direction you're going with FNS. But then if you go with Apex, you're aggressing back to the sort of style that won you the major, but it's also the style that blew up the team. So like, that's a super interesting narrative, which way they want to go. I shotgun writing that feature.
If whoever you don't go with, like, their only choice is just to play with like the leftovers of Envious, which who wants that?
But surely NBK could find a spot on Mousesports or FaZe. Like, he's a clear upgrade on.
I would hope,
because FaZe should be paying a lot of money to get NBK.
Here's what I think. This is okay. I have no actual background information on this. I'm being honest. I personally just think Olaf is coming back. Like, I'll say sometime this summer. It's my personal opinion. I think he'll come back. So while I think he would fit right into that spot and do a better job than Exist, I think Kerrigan said they have a lot more news now, and I think that news is that he probably told them he's back soon. That's just my feeling. So
but I'd prefer having FaZe with NBK than with Olaf.
You would?
To be
Really?
honest.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah.
Because I feel like FaZe would have a little more passive power in that case. Like I feel like Olaf playing some positions, I feel like you'd be better suited having a different player there. But
is that going to help them beat Astralis?
Which ones? Which ones are you thinking of right now?
Well, like here's a good example is like B Lurk Inferno. Like I think that Olaf is kind of wasted in that. Like it's weird to have Olaf Meister there instead of having someone that's going to be more passive and a better clutcher in that position, because oftentimes that person is just going to be the last one in and have be stuck clutching on the A side.
Doesn't Nico normally play that?
No, well, when I watched, it was Olaf playing that spot. So I don't know about now, but that's definitely a position where I see someone like, what are you like? To me, Olaf should be playing the role that Rain is playing. And it's weird to have both of those players on the team. And I feel like you'd rather have someone who's more stable and more passive in that team composition. And Olaf just seems like the odd one out.
It just feels like it works on the CT though. Like when you have Olaf Meister pushing CT, like when opposite side of the map is Rain on something like Cash or something like this. Like I don't know. Like I think Olaf Meister does bring a lot to the team, even though like there's not a great like role diversity on the original FaZe lineup before the switch. Max, did I get to let you make a lineup? Oh no, I did, and you sort of squandered it on a Cloud9 dream, man.
Well, no, I think the dream is honestly a Dren to Na'Vi. I think that's like a legit fucking world-beating roster. Like that's the huge dream, and I also think I definitely agree with Sam's like Woxic and MBK move. But yeah, as we've said, I think in the last couple episodes, the bigger problem is the fact that Astralis does have the top 3 players in each of their respective positions. So it's like you can't really source better players than Astralis most of the time. Like unless you're talking about Device, then maybe you can find a better AWP than Device. Simple. But like in terms of simple. Oh yeah. Yeah, but and that's why the Dren move is so good, because then Na'Vi have like that extra win condition to push them over just beyond simple. But in terms of like Glaive I honestly was thinking about the other day. If you look at in terms of the balance of his firepower and the balance of how tight Astralis is as a team, probably the best IGL. Like I would put him above Fallen, like peak Fallen in a sense. Like he's probably the best IGL of all time. Like I'd be willing to go like right now in terms of what he's doing. And then you look at Dupree, MVP of the most like Dupree is insane right now. Zipnix is insane right now. Magis it's so hard to construct a roster to beat Astralis like on paper. And so I think you have to look at the sort of more intangibles, like in terms of creating a chaotic roster. And so even though I was sort of in jest making the C9 roster, I think that's the train of logic I'm going down, because you can't have like the Counter-Strike mathematics, because that's a really common thing in MMA, like MMA math, where you but I don't think you can really do that to beat Astralis, because in theory, like Astralis always has the trump card of that win condition over any team you make. So I think if you're trying to figure out a team to beat Astralis, it's more about like the things you can't really put on paper.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we did about an hour show. I think Max did a good job of answering the question, can anyone best Astralis? No. I mean, we could have saved a lot of time, but that's been the podcast.